Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy.
The Israeli Defense Forces Namer armored personnel carrier is the most survivable, best protected troop transport in the entire world.
This APC turned on invincibility God mode, Yahweh mode.
So why then did the United States military pass on acquiring it in 2013? And why is Israel the only ones using it today? Is there something wrong with the Namer?
So what's the correct way to deploy it on the battlefield? And why did the IDF have to ghetto rig this thing together in the first place?
But we'll see, this is just the beginning of a pattern where the Israelis, they often lack funding and they have a lack of available equipment, which forces them to improvise, adapt, and create clever solutions.
But first, I enjoy studying military strategy and geopolitics when I put these videos together, which is why I'm very excited about this video's partner, Conflict of Nations. This game is a free online PvP strategy game where you get to choose a real country to lead during World War III. You can choose your own strategy and engage in epic battles to take over the world. Declare war or forge alliances in game with up to 128 different players. Conflict of Nations lets you choose from many different highly detailed units and accurate vehicles to build your army. You can use tanks, jets, nuclear submarines, and much more. You can play with the same account on both PC and mobile for free. Get an exclusive gift by clicking the link in the description. Receive 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. Offer only available for 30 days.
First off, we need to talk about this vehicle's bizarre history. In the Arab-Israeli War in 1948, the Israeli military surprised everyone when they captured a T-45 tank and converted it into a troop transport by removing the 8.5-ton turret and switching out the engines. And what do you know, having the heavier armor of the tank chassis for an armored personnel carrier worked really well. This led to the development of the Israeli Astriat APC, 200 of which entered service in 1988. In 1982, during the Lebanon War, we saw Israel using the American armored personnel carrier called the M113, which deployed alongside the Merkava tank. This APC performed horribly. It was said to be unable to stop even armor-piercing small arms rounds. Not reassuring for your average infantryman sitting in the hull, so the IDF looked at their Merkava main battle tank and they got a brilliant idea. What if they converted it into a makeshift armored personnel carrier? The engine was already placed in the front of the vehicle, giving room for troops to leave out the back ramp, just like an APC. They realized they could remove the turret and the palleted ammunition racks in storage, thus allowing 10 soldiers to fit in this heavily armored hull. These ghetto-rigged, heavily armored, half-tank, half-troop transport were far more combat effective and survivable than anything that they had, much less the M113. The vehicle could take a beating, reportedly able to withstand a 125mm cannon hit directly to its frontal arc after modified composite armor was added. In 2004, during the Israeli-Gaza conflict, the war once again showed how unfit the M113 was for frontline combat duty in a world where RPGs and anti-tank guided missiles existed. In 1 month of fighting in June 2004, 2 M113s were destroyed with 11 IDF soldiers KIA in Gaza. The Israeli Minister of Defense ordered a prototype heavy APC codenamed Tiger to be created from the retired Merkava Mark I tank. Instead of using obsolete hulls, a decision was made to produce the Namer APC with brand new Merkava Mark IV hulls roughly from 2008 onward, where they started calling it the Namer. The word Namer means leopard in Hebrew, but in reality it's a combination of words Nagmash, meaning APC, and Merkava. These prototypes were tested and they were shown publicly sometime between 2005 and 2006, but it was a 2006 conflict with Lebanon that really spurred things on here. Each time they modified one of the tanks into one of these Namer APCs, it cost them $750,000 per vehicle, and the vehicles originally cost $3 million to create. For a small country of 9 million people with a GDP of 135 billion in 2004, this was a steep price tag. In the same month, the IDF began testing the American Stryker wheeled armored vehicle as a potential fix to their troop transport problem. A year later, on January 11, 2005, the Israeli army issued a statement that they would not be buying the Stryker for its mechanized infantry units. So this is the second time that they've been unhappy with American equipment. In 2015, the Merkava II main battle tank variant, with its small 100 105mm cannon was aging and being completely replaced because it was unable to be fitted with the larger 120mm main cannon that's standard today. The IDF started taking these old models out of storage in order to modify them into armored personnel carriers. The cannon, turret, and tank shells were all gutted like some kind of full-blown home renovation. 580 of the Merkava II were built since 1983. This gave the IDF a lot of material to work with, and it was a much cheaper option than buying a whole new infantry fighting vehicle. Israel's known for producing very unusual but useful vehicles that are tailored specifically for their very narrow needs. For instance, the first Western mass-produced explosive reactive armor and active protection system were designed by Israel because they had been dealing with this problem of how to protect tanks in urban combat and terrorist ambushes that can happen from 360 degrees, unlike conventional combat, where equipment is designed for frontal attacks mostly. So remember, this is a small country about the same size as New Jersey. There's not a whole lot of weak bridges that need to be driven over like in Europe, so it doesn't matter how heavy they are. Israel also doesn't need to worry about flying them in cargo planes to the front lines, thousands of miles away, because they're fighting in their own backyard. We also need to account for the fact that Israel's military is much smaller and their population size is tiny to draw from. They have 170,000 active duty soldiers and a population of 9.2 million people, about the same as Manhattan in New York. This means each vehicle and each soldier is incredibly valuable and difficult to replace for Israel. I'm not saying that I was expendable in Iraq to the US military, but there were a million other troops that waiting around if I kicked the wrong IED. So the Israeli military has placed an emphasis on protection and survivability of their armored vehicle with the Namer, and until recently, it came at the cost of firepower. They sacrificed firepower for protection. All they had was a 50 cal on top. The production variant was unveiled in September 2008. It was extremely well protected, but it was also armed with just small arms machine guns. Commanders tend to need to use armored vehicles for assault and offensive operations. Cannons are necessary for that in an urban environment because they can cut through buildings where enemies prefer to hide. In 2013, the US Congressional Budget Office document revealed the reason why they turned down the Namer IFV to replace the M2 Bradley. The Namer would decrease firepower by 36%, according to them. On page 3, it tells us how they analyze the priorities for a new infantry fighting vehicle. Derived from the Army's analysis, the areas of improvement that they're most looking at is protection and survivability 40%, lethality 30%, mobility 20%, and maximum number of passengers was 10% of their consideration. So the Namer failed because it didn't have enough firepower. So the first public mention of an IFV version appeared in 2009 with the Israelis announcing that they were looking into arming the Namer with a 30mm autocannon. The video was released by the Israeli Ministry of Defense showcasing the platform's firepower. Despite the Namer's prodigious 60-ton curb weight, it still is very mobile and boasts a respectable 1200 horsepower diesel engine. But I hear you, what about if I need to go to the bathroom? I don't want to step outside and get picked off by some Hamas sniper while doing my business. Worry not, the Namer actually has a toilet in it. They added it based on troop feedback. Many missions where they had to sit there on board for 24 hours at a time in combat zones. Wait, when I think about it, 11 soldiers using that toilet in the back of that cramped tiny hull, I would rather just step outside and get shot. But let's say you're out there and you're following all of the best tactics, and you have the best driver and the best squad, and you still screw up and get yourself shot by an RPG or an anti-tank missile. Just because you're terrible at war doesn't mean you should have to pay for it with your life. Israel invented the Trophy Active Protection System for those of us who are terrible at combat. It uses radar detection to track incoming projectiles, then it automatically swivels around and fires a shotgun spray of explosive form penetrator pellets at the rocket as soon as it's within range. This blast detonates the incoming warhead before it impacts on your armor. It's called the hard kill defensive system, and it responds in a fraction of a second. It can even angle upwards to shoot at javelins or NLAWs. This is the reason why we're seeing every major superpower trying to develop faster missiles, because that's the only way to defeat the trophy system if it flies faster than 2,500 meters per second. One account elaborated on it in a RAND Corporation publication, outlined that the trophy system during Israel's 2014 Operation Protective Edge, quote, Indeed, according to some accounts, there are at least 15 instances of active protection systems intercepting Cornet-style missiles. Anecdotally, some IDF patrols reported that they did not even realize that active protection systems had intercepted an incoming round until they returned their assembly areas and realized the outside of the vehicles were black with trophy intercepts. The only possible downside is if you're standing outside the vehicle when it goes off, there's a lot of fragments flying around during a trophy defensive explosive. This is a relatively new invention created by Israel, and every force has tried to copy it since then. The Russians tried to have a version. The trophy was created in 2011, has been operating since then. It's a little expensive. We're talking about $900,000 US, so about a third the cost of the whole tank, but it's a lot cheaper than replacing the tank. The only reason it's not on more vehicles is because it draws a lot of power. So unless you have a turbocharger and an insanely powerful power pack in your engine, you cannot run this system. In response to the unceasing missile, rocket, and mortar fire attacks on civilian centers in Israel, on July 7, 2014, Israel launched a military operation codenamed Operation Protective Edge. Israeli Defense Forces targeted strategic Hamas facilities, tunnels, weapons, and leadership. The conflict lasted 50 days, with a series of short-lived ceasefires breached by Hamas. In this conflict, the Namer was hit by RPGs, direct hits by Russian Cornet HEGMs, but the vehicle emerged from the combat relatively undamaged. No damage to the armor, and no personnel were reported as hurt in this instance. This caused the IDF to increase production of the Namer, but there was one problem remaining, and it was still lacking firepower at this point. The 2017-2018 Namer IFV version is fitted with an unmanned Raphael turret and armed with a combination of 30mm orbital Mark 44 Bushmaster autocannon and spike-guided missiles. Unlike the TOW anti-tank missile in America, the Namer Spike MR is a fire-and-forget missile, meaning that the Namer's gunner can rapidly engage two enemy targets in short order, rather than optically guiding one missile to the target, which is a process that takes several seconds, and then the gunner needs to look around and spend time acquiring a new target. Another huge plus for this system is that the launcher is located under armor, which means safer reloading. With the Raphael Mini Samson RCWS with multi-sensor target acquisition systems, I've used these remote stations before. It sounds cheap, but it's true, they are exactly like aiming in a video game. The joystick is incredibly responsive to your touch. The one I used was stabilized, which is incredible to watch because even as you move, the platform is smooth up to a point, of course. If the vehicle makes a sudden lurch or stops or starts, your aim will get thrown off at that point. The fascinating thing about this turret system is the fact that it's fairly modular and can be installed on any other platform. The unmanned turret is basically just sitting on top of the armor rather than sinking into the hull. It's safer than manned turrets. It also keeps that additional room in the hull that's necessary to be able to transport a full squad. Without the unmanned turret technology, you couldn't have that carrying capacity. The fact that the turret is unmanned means that any enemy weapon penetrating the turret will be much less likely to kill or injure the vehicle crew. Similar vehicles like the US M2 Bradley is 32 tons, the Russian BMP is 18 tons. They're much lighter. There's currently a debate going on in the military world about whether it's wise to put all of your eggs in one basket on the modern battlefield. With so many drones, precision artillery, and shoulder-fired anti-tank munitions, all of your eggs in one basket means having all of your average infantrymen in one vehicle, and they're easy to take out. There's a school of thought that maybe smaller platforms spread across the battlefield will be safer. The only comparably sized and weight APC projects would be the Russian T-15 Armata, which is likely 10 to 20 pounds lighter, but even that vehicle has never really been produced in large numbers and is probably just a prototype, not in any functioning units at least. It's almost like the Namer saw the future of warfare, because one of the unique aspects of it is that its roof armor is extremely thick. They did this because of urban warfare in Israel, but it turned out to be very smart because I have a feeling very soon that we'll see Javelin and NLAW versions from Russia and China that target the tops of tanks. Since each and every Namer needs to be outfitted with a range of advanced equipment in Israel, its final absolute cost is going to be significantly higher than that. And it's too heavy to really transport effectively, so it's a downside for other armed forces, even though it's a plus for the IDF. But come on, it's like the luxury of IFVs here with its air-conditioned and toilet throne. Could it work for the US? Probably not, it's too heavy. Could the Namer replace the M2 Bradley in US Army service? Previous versions of the Namer were underarmed, but the new version is a compelling choice. Although heavier, it offers more protection to the US infantry. US forces must often be transported thousands of miles to battle zones, making strategic mobility an overwhelming issue. But the Army must already grapple with deploying Abrams tanks and Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. By 2017, the number of Namirs in service was 120, and today it's estimated to be roughly 150. By 2027, Israel wants to operate 531 Namer vehicles. The Namer IFV variant is still undergoing trials with only a few prototypes built. The result, however, do look promising. If you found this video interesting or compelling in some way, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe. I've been your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, on Task and Purpose. Check out this video if you have a minute, and I'll see you guys soon.
Conflict of Nations is a free online PvP strategy game happening during modern global warfare. Choose your own strategy, engage in epic battles, and take over the world. Get an exclusive gift, click the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. Offer only available for 30 days. Click the link in the description, choose your country, and fight your way to victory.